we no longer are afforded the opportunity to exist as organizations without DEI. And so we are needed, we're important, we have purpose, and we should stand in that purpose. But more importantly, to show up as our best selves and contribute in the ways that we know we can.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the All Inclusive podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Markita Jack, Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Iterable. We discuss the key elements of an effective DE&I strategy and how companies can ensure their efforts are genuine and not merely performative gestures. We also discuss the importance of creating a psychologically safe environment. As always, before jumping into the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and follow on your favourite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode. That being said, let's jump in. Hi Markita.
Hello.
I'm so glad to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. So glad to be here, and thanks so much for having me.
So let's kick things off. Why not tell our listeners a little bit more about you and your journey to where you are today?
Oh, absolutely. So, hi everyone. I'm Markita Jack, and I am the Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with Iterable Inc., which is a SaaS company headquartered in San Francisco. And I've been with Iterable as their Head of DEI for almost 2 years now. It'll be 2 years, June 21st. But prior to that, I have about a 23 at this point year background in human resources, with the last maybe 6 or 7 with a focus on DEI, either directly or indirectly through my work. So what brought me to the DEI space was, as a part of human resources, you have it's interesting, before we formalize this work, that is the body of work that kind of touched it so closely. So there was this natural gravitation for me to the work, especially as it relates to the justice, the social justice portion, and, the equity within organization. So for me, it was a natural next step as it relates to the work that I'd done in human resources. And, one of those leaps I'm so glad I took.
That's great. Sounds lovely. And so for you, what does a successful DEI strategy look like?
Yeah. So, here's the thing, I don't know if it's, just a few of us, but this landscape is really shifting quickly, right? So one thing about this, and really like any other business imperative, there needs to be some agility to respond to what the market needs, right? Or the world needs for us. And so the foundational thing I think a successful DEI strategy should have is the ability to course correct and to pivot based on the environment in which we exist, right? Because these social injustices, this work, it just shifts so quickly. And you have to be able to pivot and shift. So that is just a characteristic that I think is important. So I think the strategy has to be able to be nimble. But I also think that the strategy needs to be centered around the desire to create equitable environments, to create a place where people can naturally exist. And I think as a result, you're able to bring the best of who you are. I hate to say your authentic self, because, what does that really mean, right? And you have these buzzwords, but I think the strategy has to have a clear North Star. I think it should have clear outcomes. It should be outcome driven, because as we all know, much like any other business strategy, DEI is a business strategy. It is no longer, for us HR professionals, we're accustomed to hearing warm and fuzzy, soft skills. But these things have now transitioned into imperatives for our organization. So much like any other business strategy, it has to have a clear direction and North Star, a clear mission and vision. It needs to have strategic priorities that align with the overall organizational priorities, and then also clear and defined and executable outcomes. And also, don't let me forget accountability.
Yeah.
To have a measure of how we hold people accountable for this work. I mean, because just like with sales, you have numbers, you know, with growth, you have numbers. And so people are held accountable for that number, those numbers. And I think in this space, it gets kind of tricky because you think of quotas when you think of numbers, but that's not how we need to think of this. So those are things that I think are imperative.
No, I agree. And for you, I mean, what does that look like? Like how can we really implement accountability?
Mhm.
What would you say is an effective way?
Yeah, so I think to implement accountability, you have to have a clear path for or a clear understanding of what people will be held accountable for, right? So
Mm,
a plan. I hate to say a scorecard, but you need some type of framework. Otherwise, it's kind of like it's nebulous, right? So it needs to be concrete, right? It needs to be clear. So accountability, one, there's a clear outcome. There also is a clear role, there are clear roles and responsibilities, right? And there's a clear path for how you expect it to be reached. And then, obviously, honestly, you need, I hate to say buy in, but you have to have alignment. And you can't, as in the DEI function, hold people accountable if the organization is not supporting you in that, right? So I think those things are important, like when accountability for what? Like, again, a clear path or
mm.
plan,
And then if
you
you're
know?
telling someone, okay, we're going to hold you accountable, but if it's just you, then
Mhm.
it's I mean,
Right.
that's not going to do very much. I feel like it's the same sort of thing where I think as a child, if I
Mhm.
knew if I knew right, okay, my sister is telling me, oh, mom said that you need to do this. I'm like, okay, and then I don't do it, and she's like, oh, you haven't done it. I'm like, what? Is it just you that's gonna be telling me off? Like, who
Right.
else is
Absolutely.
who else is gonna be?
And to your example, there has to, I hate to say there have to be repercussions, but the same repercussions if you don't hit any of your other metrics, right? As a
Mm,
business professional, is it like, does it impact your pay? Does it impact your performance? So yeah. And then also, like, if you don't have shared accountability, then I hate to say there's no, like pressure. Like, if to your point
mm,
about parenting, if mom says no and dad says just go to dad. So you're absolutely correct in that.
yeah. And so for you, what have you found to be one of the most challenging things in working within DEI?
So for me, one thing that's important to me is ensuring DEI is embedded into the fabric of the organization versus being seen as this extra thing that we do, or this, like this other thing over here, right?
Mm,
So I think for me, the challenge is, aligning with the strategy of your peers, right? Seeing how you come alongside and making sure you have to have a very strong and cohesive relationship and some alignment on the strategy and where it's going, right? So if you're going to embed this work into the fabric of the organization, that means you have to be closely knit and tied into the partner that you're working with, right? So, for example, when you think about, being equitable, one thing where equitability really lives is within processes, right? So, if I don't own the recruitment process and that's owned by the recruiting team, I have to have a partnership with the leader to say, what is your vision for recruitment and this process? Okay, well, here's how DEI helps. Here's how we can ensure that it's equitable and that it's fair and that it's consistent. So if you have opposing points of view, you can see how easily that becomes a barrier to success because you're not aligned. No one, and I'm not saying you have to agree on everything, but you have to have a partnership where you can challenge one another's thinking, and where you can align even if you don't agree.
mm,
And so I think that is so very important, and it can really be a barrier to success, or if your colleagues don't see this as important, those things can make it a challenge. And also, I think we all know lack of resources, right? So, a lot of times in this role, they expect for one person to really own and champion it. and execute, but it really affect an organization and really, do the work in a way that's meaningful. We have to have the financial resources and the human resources to do the work, and
Mm.
also the I guess freedom or be empowered to really do the work. And that empowerment also comes through resources, whether it's financial, whether it's people, and then autonomy, right? So, like, you need to be able to feel free to do the work in the way that you think is best, because hopefully that's why they asked you to lead it, right? So,
I agree. I think autonomy is one of the ones that I haven't heard from a leader speak on, um, which I think it's an important one. Because like you said, you don't want to feel restricted because there's a lot to do, right? There's a lot to cover, and
mhm.
so if it's already going to be difficult, you already know, all right, okay, this is going to be hard. Let me roll up my sleeves. Let me get ready. But if you've got a ball and chain only a couple feet behind you, you ain't going to get no far. So you're going to be struggling and it's going to take you 10 times harder. So I think um, I agree. I think autonomy is it's really important, and to be able to pursue the goals in the way that you see fit. Um, but in order to do that, also, I think it's important that you get the support of the the most senior individual in the organization, because then ultimately once you have that, I feel like naturally you'll then be able to get that autonomy and get that freedom that you
I
need.
think it depends on the reporting structure, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So, in some organizations, DEI rolls directly into the CEO. And then in other organizations, it rolls through human resources, or other, it's not necessarily a direct reporting structure into the CEO. So I think that's when it could shift, right? Or there could be barriers, because here's one thing I really want to say about this position and this role and this work. I don't know that people understand the emotional toll that it takes on the person that's doing the work. So it's important that, for as much as you can, remove any barriers to success, because the role in itself is already, people trauma dump. They want you to
Yeah.
solve, or they're like, they
Mm.
come to you, I feel discriminated against, I feel like I'm not included. Like, that's a lot to take on from people and to be ultimately in some ways responsible for. So over time, the work itself, right? Like, and it's not, bad that it's good that they feel comfortable coming, right? But
Yeah.
you can take on, if we're human in any way, you take on some level of that emotion. So
Yeah, of course.
for where we can, the professionals in this role have to feel supported and have autonomy because of their health and their well-being and their ability to continue the work. And I think in this, now that we've been in it for several years and it's been hot and heavy for several years, we need to kind of do a check-in on the DEI professionals, right? Like, are you okay?
Yeah. I don't quite feel like there is a particular resource out there just yet that provides that option. So I know there's a number of well-being pieces that is the responsibility for HR to take on and create for all of the employees within the organization. And that's great. And I myself have used them within organizations that I've worked with and work with, and I think they're amazing. But in the same breath, I don't know whether there is anything that's implemented to assist the actual DEI practitioner, that individual leader that actually hears those stories time and time and time again. Um, because it's important. Because, like you said, as humans, if we're like we're all human beings, we are emotional beings. So, and I'd like to say people want to be good people. Like you want to do good things. You want to help someone. If someone comes to you with a problem, if my friend comes to me with a problem, I want to help her. Like,
Right.
you feel for that person. So I can only imagine as a leader, when you're hearing those sorts of stories where people are feeling excluded and discriminated, they've had awful experiences with their manager, they feel like they're being stifled. It's whilst it's one thing, it motivates you to keep going in terms of, okay, no, I'm definitely going to do this. I want to champion. I want to prevent these sorts of situations happening. But at the same breath, it's like when the situation does happen and you hear about it, it's emotional. It's hard hitting. So for you, what, without that resource just yet, there isn't a specific tool I can name that you can go to. But what do you do to help your own well-being whilst being in the role?
You know, one, I make sure that I take time for myself. And that gets hard, right? Like if you're, on the airplane, they say, before you put on anyone else's mask, put your mask on first. So that's important. There are just certain things that I do. And sometimes I have to just pull away. Now, I will tell you, as an iterator, which is what we call ourselves at Iterable, I am fortunate to work alongside amazing executives that literally, I think about one-on-ones I have with my CEO, my CFO, my COO, where it's almost like before any business conversation is had, before any um, discussion about, I guess you would say, work takes place, they check on me as an individual. So I think ensuring within your organization that your values align, and our values are trust, balance, growth mindset, and humility. Those things are exhibited in your personal interactions, and that's one thing. So it's really about the organizational culture that supports you when the systems in place, maybe you're not able to get to those, right? So it's those conversations around those check-ins, and that's why it's also so important. And that's really what sustains you. And when your organization has a culture where you connect on a human, from a human place, it helps sustain. And then finally, I would say join a community of like-minded individuals. So I'm in a DEI collective, right? And so we get together to talk about those things that we're struggling with, how we help each other with well-being. And so it's really just making sure that you invest the same things that you suggest for other people, and pull some of those levers yourself. Execute. Sometimes we just get so in the work that we don't pull up. So I would say pull up.
Oh, I love that. No, that's a good take. And um, on the topic of kind of well-being, and then obviously speaking on emotional and sometimes traumatic situations, how can organizations create that environment, that psychological safety where people feel comfortable coming to you with the problems that they're facing?
I think the ways they can do that is celebrate when they see it happening, where people have the courage to speak up, where people utilize the tools and resources that are available. Also, make them accessible, right? And so make sure that you're sharing with people within your organizations that they know what tools and resources are available to them. And I think it's also important, there's this concept called shadow of a leader, where leaders really exhibit the behaviors that they, want to uplift within their team. So for example, I can't tell you all, make sure you take time off if I don't take time off. So it's really leading the way or modeling the way, if you will. And so I think that inclusive leadership is critical and it's important. So it's really making sure within your organization you have ways that you can help build inclusive leadership. And so, sometimes psychological safety also is established from a team level, with leaders showing vulnerability to themselves, right? Sharing experiences where, I too have experienced situations where I needed EAP, even saying things like that. And so I think it's really people, they hear what you say, but they really watch what you do. And so I can say as a leader, I promote psychological safety. I want you to feel comfortable coming to me. I want you to feel comfortable speaking out in meetings. But then when people take those steps, they're met with an undesirable outcome. So I think it's so important. We can say we promote it, but you really have to take action. And you might say, you know what, Natasha, thank you for speaking up on that. Thank you for challenging my way of thinking. So it's really reinforcing the message of psychological safety more than just putting that out there as this thing. Oh, I want it to be psychologically safe. But then when you speak up, you're either cut off or. And so I think that's so important in establishing psychological safety within an organization.
No, I think yeah, I think it's important to not just pay lip service to to that, and so when it does happen, you kind of acknowledge it, and like you said, praise that individual for taking that courage and having the courage to talk. Is important. So I like hearing about what everyone's up to, all the projects that they've got coming on. So, Makita, can you share with us a particular project or initiative that you're working on or have recently completed working on that you're really excited about and proud of?
Yeah, honestly, something I'm working on right now is around really volunteerism and how we show up in our communities and how we're able to impact our communities as an organization. So I'm super excited to be partnering with our, marketing team as well as with our legal team to really think about our CSR and ESG strategy and how we show up in our communities, whether it's philanthropic or volunteerism, and really making sure that our goal at Iterable is to bring joy to the world and to our customers. And like that is so huge. And it's a huge task and responsibility to say that, right? However, I think one of the ways people find joy is through purpose, right? And so we're so not, granted, I want to say this is something we've been doing all along. We've done volunteer matching, we've promoted volunteerism, but we're really as a late stage startup, we're really in a place where, what got us here won't get us there. So, how do we take our strategy to the next level and really put a lasting imprint on our communities in which we exist? And for us, it's a global community, right? So while we are based in the US, we do have offices in the UK and Australia. And so, really thinking about from a global perspective, what our role is, what our voice is, how we show up in the marketplace, and how, even though sometimes for SaaS companies, specifically for ESG, it's hard to really make an impact because we don't necessarily own, we don't have a physical product that we put out, right? However, there are ways that we can help, whether it's through the work that we do with our vendors, whether it's through work that we do with our partners in the community. And so that is super important. And also, I'm a huge volunteer geek, if you will. And so, thinking about the possibility of reducing food insecurities for people, helping our youth with literacy and access to technology, thinking about how we can give in communities and just really I know make the world a better place sounds really cheesy, but I have, and I volunteer even outside of the organization. When you can connect a person to purpose,
Mm.
when you can connect a person to sometimes a line of sight, um, where they're not necessarily familiar. Like, I don't know what food insecurity is, but working and seeing how we can work to alleviate food insecurity. When you tie a person to meaning, you really ignite something in them that transcends into the workplace, that transcends into discretionary effort, right? And so there is so much in this. So I'm so excited about it. And I hope you can hear it in my voice, but looking forward to really launching and executing on that. And we're kicking that off and really shaping that with a summer of volunteerism where we're going to really promote focused missions where people can take that mission and deploy it within their local community. So we're just really excited about that.
Oh no, that sounds amazing. I can completely I can tell in the way that you're speaking about it. All smiles, all teeth. Love, love, love.
Oh,
Um, no, that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. No, not many people like when someone is really passionate and they're smiling when they're really happy is when you see teeth. And I think I always show teeth. You have great teeth, by the way.
oh,
Um, but no, I think that sounds amazing, and I think that um it totally resonates with me in terms of purpose. Like once you give someone purpose, then it definitely transcends through everything that they do. Everything is just you'll see they show up in such a different way. Um
mhm,
and even for me personally, I feel like when I found my purpose in terms of creating the platform for this podcast and bringing leaders like yourself together on the show and just to showcase more of these great conversations and more of this great work that's being done. I think when I finally got to that point of like, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I want to do, this is how I'm going to do it, I felt so much better about myself. And I feel like for me, one of the things is after I had my daughter, that's where I felt I lost my purpose, which sounds
mhm.
really weird. I think actually
No,
when
it
you
does
say it now,
not.
it sounds weird.
So
How is it that you've become a mother? Like you've entered this new stage of your life. How have you lost purpose? Shouldn't it be like my purpose be looking after this human being? But I mean, yes, it is.
totally get it. As a
But
mom of three, I totally get
yeah,
it.
do you know what I mean? I think for me that was a turning point because I'd never really ever had that feeling before. I've always kind of had a good job, like go to work, make money, have great experiences. That was it for me, and that was fine. Um, but yeah, I think after I had her, I was like, oh, actually, like, who am I again? Like, what am I doing
Mhm.
now? Where am I going? I mean, I know I've got this person next to me now who's going to be with me for life, and that's great. And I feel like I kind of know where I need to go with that, but what else? What else is there? So yeah, I think I totally agree, and I think the volunteerism that you've spoken about is fantastic and that's phenomenal. And I think a lot more. It's I don't think many organisations focus on that at all, really. Um, and the social impact of the work that they do and the services that they provide needs to be looked at in a little bit of a more of a in a different way now. I think because the way that the world is going, it's important that we need to pivot and we need to look at outside of our own little bubble. That's what I feel like. Which it sounds like at Iterable, that is what you guys are doing, which is fantastic. Um, well, Markia, I've so much thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. Before you do leave us, I would love to hear one piece of parting advice that you would offer up to DEI leaders.
One piece of advice is take care of your mental well-being. Don't get so caught up in the work that you forget who you are and why you are. And so take time to put your mask on. If that means a little bit of crying, that's okay. If that means going out, taking time to volunteer to pour back into yourself, do that. Um, because without our profession, I think, you know, there we no longer are afforded the opportunity to exist as organizations without DEI. And so we are needed, we're important, we have purpose, and we should stand in that purpose. But more importantly, to show up as our best selves and contribute in the ways that we know we can, put your mask on, take care of yourself.
Oh, I love that. That's lovely. Thanks again so much, Marquita. I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, and also, by the way, anyone listening, how best can they connect with you?
Certainly. So you can find me on LinkedIn under Markita Jack. Please feel free to connect with me. I would love, love, love to establish new relationships and new partnerships. So reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Oh, will do. So I will leave a link down below in the show notes to your LinkedIn profile. So if anyone does want to reach out to you, they'll definitely be able to do that. And once
Yes.
again, Nikita, thanks so much.
Thank you.